Tiva 3 was a world full of green light and towering trees, where the air shimmered with warmth and soft pollen floated like snow. Its people, the Arvis, were peaceful insect-like beings who had lived for generations in balance with the wild, building tall crystal towers around the roots of jungle canopies and floating platforms above warm lakes. They had never known war, never raised armies, and never imagined that one day their quiet harmony would be interrupted by fire from the Yawa. Sky. The trouble began with deep vibrations felt in the forest floors, too regular to be natural, too strong to be ignored. Before long, black ships began appearing in orbit, shaped like long knives, cold and silent, and from them came the Zareth, a nomadic war species feared across many star systems. The Zareth were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They did not rule, they moved. They stripped, they harvested, they left planets broken behind them. Tiva 3 was rich in minerals, deep water gas vents, and rare plant life, all valuable to the Zareth, who saw the planet not as a home, but a supply station, waiting to be emptied. The Arvis had no defense fleets, only science vessels and transport gliders. They tried negotiation, sending messages of peace, offering trade, but the Zareth never replied. Instead, their first action was to destroy one of the Arvas unarmed. Observation towers, burning it from orbit in a flash that turned the nearby trees to glass. Panic spread quickly. Emergency shelters were opened, though they had never been used before. Families buried their cultural crystals, unsure if anything would survive. And in their central city of Velerith, where silver trees touched the clouds, a group of old thinkers and young engineers gathered inside a storm-hardened dome to send one final message, not to any ally, for the Arvis had none, but to anyone, anywhere, who might hear. The signal was short, little more than a repeating tone followed by a series of translated phrases. We are under attack. We cannot fight. We seek help. Please respond. It was broadcast in over 40 known galactic dialects and aimed in all directions, carried on a wave of hope more than logic. The message vanished into the stars. No one on Tiva 3 expected an answer. Not really, but far across the galaxy, deep in the asteroid belt between Jupiter and Saturn, Earth's listening post, Theta 9 quietly processed deep space signals day and night, sorting through bursts of radiation, old echoes, and background static. Most of it was nothing. Some of it came from abandoned satellites or rogue traders. The AI in charge of the station, named Miranda, operated without human supervision, filing reports, tagging curious signals, and maintaining silence. But on one unusually quiet rotation, Miranda detected something odd, a low-power signal coming from a part of the galaxy mostly avoided due to its unstable star clusters. At first, she ignored it, but then she noticed something strange. Buried in the message's metadata was a file header written in Earth Standard, not machine code, but human language, clean and clear. To those from the blue planet, we know you listen. We ask that you hear us now. That phrase triggered Miranda's deep alert system. She didn't know what the Arvas were, or where Tiva 3 was located exactly, but she knew this was different. Someone out there had written directly to Earth. The signal wasn't a general broadcast. It was a call meant for them. Within minutes, Earth's Deep Space Response Office received the full report. The human analysts listened closely, repeating the message again and again. The words were simple, but the tone, there was something raw in it. The background static, the hesitation in the way the words repeated, the pauses, it all painted a picture of people on the edge of something terrible. The fact that someone had taken the time to include a translation in Earth's own syntax made it even more powerful. Earth's command staff, spread across orbital stations and underground bunkers, debated what to do. This wasn't a council-issued emergency. The Arvas were not part of the interstellar treaty bloc. No official alliances existed. They owed humanity nothing, and humanity owed them nothing in return. But among humans, duty often began not with orders, but with instinct. Earth's Admiral Linnea Ruiz, watching the signal on a cold-screened wall inside her ship's operations room, saw enough. She didn't see war. She saw civilians. She saw a soft world facing hard extinction. And she knew Earth had the tools, the ships, and the will to reach them. She gave the order, prepare an expeditionary aid fleet, 3 vessels equipped for defense, relief, and planetary support. The goal wasn't war. It was protection. Across Earth's spaceports, quiet movement began. No flags were raised. No broadcasts were made. 3 long-range ships, Dauntless Mercy, Verdant Reach, and Solace, Spear, were readied under silent code. Their crews, trained not only in military operations, but also in crisis relief and cultural outreach, were told only what they needed to know. Someone had asked for help, and no one else was coming. In the hangars, engineers loaded water reclamation. Systems, food replicators, terrain stabilization drones, medical units, and orbital shields. Soldiers polished exoframes, not for attack, but for rescue in unknown conditions. And somewhere, in the quiet of her personal quarters, Admiral Ruiz replayed the message one last time, focusing not on the fear in the voice, but the courage it must have taken to send it. Somewhere out there, someone believed in humans enough to reach for them in the dark. That belief alone was enough. Tyva 3 had sent a forgotten signal, but Earth had heard. And now they were coming. The Earth Federation did not light up its skies when the decision was made, nor did it broadcast bold promises to the stars. Humanity had learned, through long and difficult centuries, that true help often came in silence, in motion without noise, in preparation without ceremony. As soon as Admiral Linnea Ruiz gave the green light, every relevant system moved like a well-oiled machine. Deep in the orbital shipyard of Atlas Ring, crews received encrypted orders and began readying 3 long-range relief cruisers. Were not warships in the traditional sense, though they carried strong hulls, reinforced shields, and tactical drones designed for high-risk environments. The ships were instead designed for survival, for entering damaged worlds, for stabilizing collapsing infrastructures. Each had its own specialty Dauntless Mercy, focused on medical and planetary shielding. Verdant Reach carried atmospheric and environmental modules, and Solace Spear was equipped for rapid logistics, capable of building command centers, comms, relays, and power grids within hours of landing. Their crews were not only trained soldiers, but also engineers, biologists, medics, translators, and even cultural officers. These were the kinds of missions humanity had quietly taken on in the last few decades. Missions that required strength, yes, but also understanding, calmness, and the ability to operate under stress without becoming part of the panicked dot as they aligned. Ships were prepared. Earth's analysts continued studying the Arva's distress signal. The voice in the message was crackled and tired, with words repeated out of rhythm as if the sender was running out of time. The planet's coordinates placed Tyva 3 near the edges of a region known for being unstable and dangerous, a cluster of wild stars and shifting gravity fields avoided by most species. But that didn't matter. The important part was that someone out there had reached out to humanity specifically, embedding Earth standard text into a galactic transmission. That level of trust or desperation couldn't be ignored. Across several neutral listening stations operated by other species, quiet observations began. The message had been caught by more than just Earth. But while others filed reports and cautioned about unknowns, humanity acted. No committee votes, no debates. Just movement inside the Dauntless Mercy. Admiral Ruiz reviewed planetary maps and data on the Arvis. She studied everything: weather patterns, biology, known settlements, and the structure of their underground. Cities. She saw species built for peace, not war. She saw tall crystalline buildings designed for beauty and resonance, not for defense. She read transcripts of their language, which was based on harmonics and shared breathing patterns. She noticed how their words had no direct translation for violence, only terms for danger and imbalance. That alone said enough. On a personal screen beside her, the last line of the signal kept looping. "We ask that you hear us now." Ruiz understood what they were asking, not just for protection, but to be noticed, to not be ignored. And she swore silently that Earth would not look away. Elsewhere aboard the fleet, the crew prepared in their own ways. In the medical bay, specialists calibrated nanobot kits for insectoid physiology, running simulations based on the Arva's skeletal structures. In the cargo holds, robotic arms. Carefully packed support pods full of modular shelters and environmental filters. Human translators began learning the Arva's language, not just for command, but for kindness, for connection. Meals were prepared in bulk, enough for days of support. Teams reviewed footage of Zareth movement stall, spined beings known for speed and destruction. Not much was known about their culture, but it was clear they did not negotiate. The Zareth traveled in groups, overwhelming planets quickly, extracting what they wanted and leaving chaos behind. Most governments feared them or avoided their path entirely. But Earth wasn't like most. Humanity knew what it was like to stand alone, to fight through hopeless odds, to rebuild after collapse. They had done it in their own history more than once. And now they carried that memory with them to the stars, not as shame, but as strength. As the three ships left Earth's gravity well and jumped into FTL, their departure was nearly invisible. No crowds, no cheers, just quiet. Only a few people even knew the mission was happening. For the humans on board, this wasn't about glory. It was about something much simpler showing up when others would not. And in a distant part of space, where jungle storms brewed over soft lakes and the skies darkened under warship shadows, someone was still listening. On Tyva 3, the Arvas huddled in their lower cities, unaware that help was on the way. Their elders spoke softly, trying to calm the young. Their thinkers continued sending signals, though power was low and hope even lower. They had not seen an answer. They had not heard a reply. But still, they sent the call. And in the vast stretch between stars, 3 Earth ships flew faster than light, silent but determined. Their crews didn't know exactly what they would face. They had no allies waiting for them, no promises of success, but every heartbeat brought them closer. They had read the message. They had understood the call. And now the Deathworlders were coming not as conquerors, but as protectors. The sun was setting over the high canopies of Tyva 3 when the air began to hum with an unfamiliar tension, not from weather or insects or the natural buzz of jungle life, but from something deeper, a vibration that seemed to touch bone and breath alike. In the great city of Valerith, the Arvas gathered in quiet clusters beneath the luminous leaves, their compound eyes turned skyward, their antennae twitching with unease. For days now, they had lived with the slow dread of watching their world fall, one orbit at a time. Azereth warships had established their blockade high above the atmosphere, sometimes drifting in slow silence, sometimes releasing small craft that skimmed across the sky like predatory birds. There had been no large-scale assault yet, but the signs were clear. The Zareth were circling, studying, waiting. And the Arvas had nothing left to offer, no warriors, no weapons, only the thin hope that someone, somewhere, had heard them. Most believed the signal had disappeared into the stars unanswered, lost like a whisper in a storm. But then something changed. At first, it was only a flicker on the edge of the horizon, like a second sun rising too early, too fast. Then came the low resonance, pulsing through the atmosphere, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. And then, without warning, the clouds parted not naturally, not like rainstorms or winds, but as if something immense had pushed through the upper sky and sliced the heavens open. 3 shapes emerged from the breach, glowing softly with a blue light that did not burn, but shimmered with quiet promise. The Arvas watched in stunned silence as the ships descended, massive but graceful, their hulls reflecting the jungle canopy below. They did not fire. They did not roar. They moved with a kind of calm confidence, as if they were not here to conquer, but to stand. The largest ship, its underbelly marked with symbols unknown to the Arvas, deployed something into the sky, a thin ring that expanded rapidly and began projecting an energy shield across the main city, covering the homes, towers, and even the nearby valleys. No one knew what it was, but when a Zereth scout ship fired a test beam into the area moments later, it bounced off the shield harmlessly, scattering light like raindrops on a window. From the ground, the Arvas could hardly believe what they were seeing. For the first time in many sun cycles, something had stopped the Zereth. Not words, not trade, but presence. The humans, though the Arvas didn't yet know them by that name, had arrived. Their smaller craft descended next, touching down near the medical shelters and broken platforms at the edge of Velerith. They moved quickly, deploying modular stations, environmental filters, and soft light towers that turned the dark jungle into a zone of calm. And from the ships came beings unlike any the Arvas had seen before bipedal, heavy-footed, wrapped in strange materials that seemed to breathe and shift with their movements. They carried no obvious weapons, though the bulk of their equipment spoke of great strength. Their faces were not insectoid, nor plant-like, nor scaled. They were soft, smooth, with eyes that flickered quickly and mouths that moved constantly. Even when silent, the first human to speak stood on a small platform and raised a hand in greeting. The translator drone above her repeated her words in perfect Arvas tones. "You called," she said simply. "We heard." And that was all it took. Something broke, quietly, in the hearts of the Arvas. Not fear, but relief. Not disbelief, but gratitude. These strangers had come not in fire, but in light. And more importantly, they had come at all. Admiral Linnea Ruiz stood beside her crew, calmly observing the Zereth movements from a portable command deck. She wasn't surprised that the war species hadn't responded yet. The Zereth were methodical. They didn't retreat unless forced, and they didn't charge unless provoked. But the humans hadn't come to provoke. They had come to shield. Her orders were clear. Hold the line, support the locals, respond only if attacked. Already, her engineers had begun reinforcing the nearby transport lanes. Medical officers were scanning the Arvas for signs of stress and malnutrition. Communications teams were installing uplinks to boost local frequencies. Even the ship's artificial intelligence had begun learning Arvas customs, adjusting lighting and sound to avoid overwhelming their senses. Every action was careful, deliberate, rooted in respect. Back in orbit, the Zereth ships repositioned, their sensors now fully locked onto the Earth vessels. Their scanners read confusing data. These new ships were not like any known military class, yet their shields were stronger than most frontline fleets. Their energy signatures pulsed like stable stars, calm and cold. No threat was broadcast. No warning was given. Yet everything about the humans said, without a single word, that they would not back down. The Zereth did not understand this. In their culture, strength was shown through domination. What were these creatures who came without flags or conquest? Who built shields but not cages? who landed in silence and helped without demand? That question lingered in the stillness of orbit. On the ground, the Arvas didn't ask questions. They simply approached, one by one, offering gentle antenna gestures and musical greetings. The humans responded with smiles, nods, and the steady work of building protection around a people who had almost given up. That night, as the stars returned above the jungles of Tytha III, the sky no longer felt heavy. The shield shimmered gently, like a second atmosphere. The humans stayed up late, monitoring sensors, planning evacuations if needed, and checking the health of every Arvas elder they could find. They didn't sleep much, but they didn't complain. And somewhere in the quiet, between heartbeat and silence, the truth settled in. The Deathworlders had arrived, not with fury, but with force of purpose. Not with thunder, but with presence. And above them, the Zareth watched, unsure of what came next. The Zareth didn't send messages. They didn't issue threats or formal demands. They had no council chambers, no negotiators, and no interest in political rituals. Instead, they relied on fear, and for most of the galaxy, fear had always been enough. They watched Tytha III with cold calculation, expecting the humans to do what others had done before: flee, surrender, or offer tribute. But the humans didn't move. They didn't raise weapons. They built clinics and stabilized power nodes. They reinforced shelters. They transmitted peaceful tones on open frequencies. To the Zareth, this was unfamiliar and strange. Was it arrogance? A trap? Or something else entirely? In orbit, the Zareth war leader authorized a direct test. A single atmospheric ship, black and curved like a claw, dropped silently from above and accelerated toward the human medical zone just beyond Valorith's tree line. The Arvas watched from below, frozen in fear, knowing that even one of those vessels could burn an entire village if left unchecked. But the humans were already moving. They didn't scramble or shout. They activated their shielding field around the clinic, pulling up blue domes of light that shimmered faintly but held firm. They didn't fire. Instead, a drone flew calmly to intercept the incoming ship, sending clear signals. This was a civilian area, protected, not hostile. The Zareth ignored the warning. A beam of red plasma struck the shield, flaring against it like sunlight hitting water. The shield absorbed the hit without breaking. Then came a second shot, stronger this time, angling toward a supply vehicle. Again, the shield held. On the ground, human engineers checked their systems and confirmed no injuries. Admiral Ruiz observed from her command platform and calmly issued a short order: prepare passive countermeasures, but hold position. Around her, Earth's defense support crew stood ready, not behind mounted cannons or armed drones, but beside. Emergency medical kits, terrain scanners, and sound-dampening walls. The human mindset was simple: defend, protect, endure. They had trained in volcano zones, floodplains, collapsing cities, and storm-ridden Arctic regions. A single hostile ship was not enough to shake them. And the Zareth, watching for panic, saw none. The Earth ships in orbit didn't retreat. They adjusted their formation slightly, shifting into a triangular defensive posture used in deep space disaster zones, designed to cover all atmospheric approaches. No weapons were raised. No counterattack was launched. But the message was clear. Earth had seen fire before, and this wasn't enough to scare them. Down in the forests, the Arvas began to understand something they had never seen in their history. These strange visitors didn't respond to threats with threats. They didn't posture or shout. They didn't try to dominate. Instead, they simply refused to break. An elder named Vorelli, whose voice was once used to sing the cycles of peace, in ceremonial hives, stood in quiet wonder near the edge of the clinic and watched the human crew reset their shield generator. They walk like rivers, he whispered in harvest tones. Not loud, but nothing stops them. His words were picked up by one of the translator drones, and the nearby human technician smiled. That's kind of you to say, she replied softly, before returning to her work. The humans didn't treat the Arvas as weak or small. They answered questions when asked, listened when spoken to, and helped without judgment. Young Arvas began, following them, watching their routines, mimicking their movements. Some even tried learning their language, practicing Earth words with careful clicks and chirps. But in the skies above, the Zareth war leader had grown frustrated. Humanity's restraint, once seen as weakness, now looked like something else, something harder to define. And that made them dangerous. Another attack was authorized, this time targeting an unshielded sector far from the main city, where humans had just begun installing terrain stabilizers to protect the jungle's root systems from orbital collapse. As a Zareth strike ship dropped from orbit and charged its forward cannons, the humans acted not with offense, but with precision. A single Earth drone deployed a reflective field generator and projected a prism of deflective light across the path of the blast. The incoming energy beam fractured on contact, scattered into the upper sky like harmless fireworks. A message was sent immediately after, not from a diplomat, but from a human AI translator using neutral tones. This zone is under emergency relief protection. Continued aggression will endanger civilians. Earth advises restraint. There was no threat in the words, no anger, just fact. The Zareth pulled back, uncertain. For the first time in years, they faced opponents who didn't fear them and didn't match them in violence. Earth didn't play their game. Instead, the humans followed a different code. They understood danger, but they didn't invite it. They understood power, but they didn't abuse it. They carried within them the memory of their own survival, trials of a death world that had shaped them to endure every kind of storm. And that history lived in their actions, not their weapons. That night, under the protection of the Earth Fleet, the Arvas held their first communal gathering since the invasion began. It was not a celebration, but a quiet ceremony of light and memory. The humans were invited. Some attended. Others remained at their posts. A young Arvas child gifted a human soldier a woven leaf band, a symbol of gratitude. The soldier accepted it with a smile and placed it on his wrist. No grand speeches were made, but the message passed from one species to the other without words. We are not alone now. In orbit, the Zareth war leader held council with her commanders. They debated strategies, but something new had entered the equation: uncertainty. They had never faced a species like this. The humans had technology, yes, but more than that, they had patience. Strength without chaos, presence without fear. And above all, they had arrived because someone had asked for help. That idea alone was alien to the Zareth. The sky had opened, fire had come, but Earth had not broken. It had stood. And now Zareth would have to decide: push again and risk the unknown, or withdraw before the quiet power of Earth became something they couldn't undo. The days that followed were strangely quiet. The Zareth ships remained in orbit, watching from a distance, no longer moving in patterns of attack, but in slow, circling silence, like hunters unsure of the prey. They had not left, yet they did not strike again, as if the invisible wall created by the humans had become a boundary they didn't know how to cross. On the ground, the work continued. Earth crews expanded the shield zones beyond Velerith, securing outlying settlements and repairing old transport lines that the Arvas thought would never be used again. The humans moved with calm hands and watchful eyes, never rushing, never resting for long. They taught the Arvas how to operate basic defensive tech, not to fight, but to protect what they loved. New water filtration systems were installed, medical stations expanded, and energy links created between scattered jungle. Towns. The planet itself seemed to respond, with the wildlife calming, the skies clearing, and the sound of singing insects returning to the forests. Slowly, the fear began to lift from the hearts of the Arvis. It wasn't gone, not completely, but it no longer controlled their days. And still, the humans stayed not as rulers, not as heroes, but as guardians who asked for nothing in return. News of what had happened on Tyba III began to spread, not through grand declarations or political announcements, but through whispers carried by traders, scouts, and quiet watchers of space. Word reached distant systems that the Deathworlders humans from the planet Earth had responded to a distress call no one else would touch, that they had stood between a peaceful species and a known warforce without firing a single offensive shot, that their ships had blocked plasma strikes with silence, and their crews had held the line not through threat, but through presence. These stories sounded strange to many who heard them. In a galaxy shaped by power and fear, who would believe that help could come without a price? That strength could be shown not through destruction, but through restraint? And yet the Arvis spoke of it with clear voices, telling all who asked how the humans had come down from the sky like falling light, how they built before they defended, how they taught before they judged. Other species began to listen, some with curiosity, some with disbelief, but all with a question now echoing in their minds if the Deathworlders could stand for others. What else might they be capable of? Back on Earth, the mission logs were quietly archived. No parades were held. No medals distributed in public. Admiral Ruiz filed her reports and returned to her usual duties. To her, it had never been about recognition. It was about showing up, doing the work, and leaving the place better than it was found. That was Earth's hidden power, not in its weapons or technologies, but in the people who refused to look away from suffering, even in the coldest corners of space. She had seen the change in the Arva's eyes, in their way of standing a little taller, of speaking a little clearer. And she knew that the mission had done something deeper than protect a planet. It had planted a seed, a quiet idea that humanity was more than the galaxy had assumed, that the Deathworlders were not dangerous because they were aggressive, but because they were enduring, because when others looked away, Earth leaned in. On Tyba III, the humans prepared to leave. The main shield systems were now powered and maintained by Arva's hands. The emergency clinics had been replaced with long-term care centers. Communication relays connected even the most distant tree villages. And in the place where the first human ship had landed, a new structure stood simple, crystal-framed, open on all sides. Not a monument, but a memory. A place for both species to gather, to remember the moment the sky had broken and someone had come through. The Arvis named it the Listening Hearth. Each evening, small groups gathered there to hum their thanks into the air, soft tones carried by wind and light, hoping perhaps that someone, somewhere, might hear and know they were not forgotten. When the Earthships finally rose into the sky, the Arvas stood in silent rows beneath the jungle canopy, their wings folded, their eyes reflecting the light of engines. No one spoke. There were no words for this kind of parting, only a deep shared feeling, like a string stretched across stars, vibrating softly in the spaces between. And as the human ships slipped back into the fabric of space, a final signal echoed behind them, simple, musical, unmistakably Arvis. We will not forget. Out in the dark, the Zareth finally moved. Their fleet turned without fanfare, slowly exiting orbit and vanishing beyond the edge of sensor range. They did not attack again. They did not explain. Perhaps they understood now that Tyva III was no longer easy prey. Or perhaps they had felt, for the first time, what it meant to be watched by a species that did not fear them. The humans had not needed to fight. Their stillness had been enough. In time, the mission became a footnote in Earth's long record of aid and exploration. But in quiet corners of the galaxy, it lived untold around cargo fires, whispered through diplomatic channels, studied in old station logs. The story of the forgotten signal, the desperate call, and the arrival of ships from a distant blue world. And with each telling, the question returned: what kind of species answers a call not meant for them, travels through unknown space, stands before a war fleet, and builds instead of burns? The answer, they said, was simple: humans, Deathworlders. They came not because they were invited. They came because someone needed them. And in the quiet that followed, their presence echoed through the void, not loud, but lasting.